Unemployment down, interest rates up in the US, the stock market up, but a key part of it out of action for part of today. Let's bring in our business editor, Ross Greenwood. Ross, I tell you what, never a dull moment, is there?
Wild and woolly out there, I've got to tell you. That outage was pretty important too. The ASX 24, which basically is futures and options markets, out of action for almost 4 hours a day. But this was the number everybody was waiting for, Australia's employment numbers. And the unemployment rate is significantly better than what was anticipated, coming in at 4% for February. You can see here 77,000 more people are currently employed in Australia, which is now almost 13.5 million people, as compared with about 530,000 people who are unemployed. Number of hours worked is up. You can see the participation rate is certainly higher. Men right now above 70%. So that's a significant number of people. And so from that point of view, what you saw off the back of that was again expectations. The Reserve Bank will have little choice but to raise interest rates this year, and certainly more than once. Citi says 3 times. And then on top of that also, you've got a situation where the United States also overnight. But let's now go to Stuart Robert. Now, Stuart Robert, of course, the Employment Minister, spoke a little earlier, but what he actually was asked about was the floods, the impact of, sort of employment as a result of those floods. Here's just a little of what he said.
Looking through the operations of major industrial plants, most of those are back online, Lismore being the notable exception. All schools are back online, apart from 5, although 7 are irreparably damaged. So the economies and the local businesses, the infrastructure, the schools, the childcare centres, all of those have kicked back in and rapidly recovered.
So, Ross, how does that play into interest rates, given the Fed's move, but more importantly, its message alongside that overnight?
Yeah, there was no surprise in the US Federal Reserve raising interest rates by 1/4%. Remember, until the war in Ukraine had begun, really most analysts had expected the Fed to raise interest rates by 0.5% last night. But the message was the big thing here, and that was that there are 6 more rate rises to come this year alone to try and quell inflation right now at 40-year highs. Let's go to Jerome Powell, the chair of the US Federal Reserve, speaking after that interest rate decision.
The economy is very strong, and against the backdrop of an extremely tight labor market and high inflation, the committee anticipates that ongoing increases in the target range for the federal funds rate will be appropriate.
Yeah, so this is the thing, again, that Australia can't get too far behind the curve, as they call it, in regards to interest rate movements as compared with the rest of the world. It's one reason why our dollar, even though it did jump today, is a little lower than other places. What we'll do on Business Today is speak with Jason Falinski, the head of the House Economics Committee, also, of course, very much involved in the housing industry, about not just what's taking place with that outage of the ASX 24 today, but on top of that also, Kieran, very much those employment numbers and what comes next for Australia's economy.
Yeah, Ross, and I'm going to be joined by Warren Hogan in the next little while as well to talk a bit about that. But just before you go, the government has this challenge, doesn't it, within less than 2 weeks now, the budget, trying to deal with the cost of living thing on the one hand and ease that without having any inflationary effect on the other. It's a diabolical challenge for them.
Oh, it really is. So here's the problem. If you are raising interest rates, you're trying to take demand out of the economy to try and stop that inflation. But on the other hand, you've got a government that really is already, sort of starting to spend significant amounts of money. And so if you're trying to hand out, relief at the fuel pumps or relief somewhere else, you're actually helping to fuel even more inflation potentially. So it really is a bit of a worry for the government. The second part about it, as I understand it, is that Omicron has created a significant hole in the budget. So there's not as much money as you might have been led to believe in the budget right now. There's not much wriggle room, as I understand it, for the government to play.